So Darius decides to go to Europe and punish the Scythians. The Scythian was this tribe that lived mostly in Europe to the west of what we know today as Turkey. They lived along the Black Sea in particular. So he goes to punish them because of what they had done many decades before Darius was king, most likely before he was born. The Scythians had come to Persia, not really Persia, but the land occupied by the Medes, who used to rule over Persia. And they had invaded that land, and that history had remained among the Medes and then the Persians. So Cyrus decides for some reason to go and punish the Scythians for this. And but it doesn't turn out as he was expecting. The Scythians subdue him and his army using a well-organized psychological warfare. And that's what I'm going to tell you how it unfolded. So before he crossed over to Europe, he asked the Greeks to help him build a bridge over the Strait of Bosporus, which is this body of water that has always been considered to be the border between Europe and Asia. At this point, most Greeks were under the control of Persia, even when they had their own tyrants and leaders and kings. The Persians still controlled them. So Darius asks their leaders, their kings, their tyrants to help build this bridge. They build it, and he tells them to guard it as he crosses over to Europe until he comes back. And Herodotus tells us that when they crossed this bridge, he asked these soldiers to throw rocks at a particular spot. And Herodotus tells us that he did go and see the mountain that came out of that. And that showed how large an army Darius was commanding. So he crosses over to Europe. And while he's not reached the land occupied by the Scythians, he conquered a few tribes on the way. Not really through war, but these tribes, after seeing how big an army Darius had, they decided to kind of like surrender. So they surrender. One of those I did mention is a tribe called the Gitai, which was a tribe that worshipped a guy by the name Zalmoxis, who Herodotus tells us that is highly likely was a slave of Pythagoras, the guy behind the Pythagoras theorem. So when the Scythians learned of the advance of Darius, they decided to reach out to their neighbors and try to persuade them so that they form an alliance so that they face Darius, because they knew Darius was coming with a huge army. And they knew there was no way they themselves could match that army. They needed help from the neighboring tribes. So they called a meeting with the kings of the neighboring tribes, and they started persuading them, telling them, the Persians are coming. While they are coming to punish us, it seems like they will not spare you people. We've already heard that they've conquered tribes like the Gitai, so you people don't just sit pretty and think like you will be safe when he arrives here. So you need to come to join us in an alliance so that we form a big army that will match the army he has. Some of the tribes, three of the other tribes agreed to form an alliance with the Syrians. That is the Geloni, the Budini, and the Saromatai. The Saromatai is the tribe I talked about in the previous video. This tribe was a mixture of the Scythian and the Amazons. The Amazons, this tribe that had warrior women, and they came and they married, or they got married, or they married the young men of the Scythians, and they formed a new tribe of the Saromatai. But the tribe still maintained some of the habits of the Amazons. The women went to war, the women went hunting. They did not behave like what was expected of women in most communities then. So that tribe accepted to join the Scythians. There are others, like 6 or 5, refused, and they told the Scythians, this is your problem. You are the ones who went to Asia. You are the ones who attacked the Medes and the Persians by extent. And now that's your problem. The Persians are not coming for us, they're coming for you. If it happens that when they arrive here, they do attack us, then we'll go to war with them. But until that happens, this is not our problem. So when the Scythians realized that even with the 3 other tribes who had joined them, they could not put together an army that was the size that could match what Darius was coming with, they decided they were not going to face him at the battlefield. They decided what they were going to do. They were going to wage a psychological war on him. And this was so effective because in the end, Darius had to run for his life. He was so fearful. He became so paranoid by the activities of the Scythians and their allies that he didn't get to fight them in a battlefield. He ran away. And this is what the Scythians did. They divided themselves, their army in particular, into 3 groups. Before that, they'd taken the women, of course, of the other tribes except the Saromatai, whose women went to war with their men, and the elderly and the children and their livestock, and they gave them like 3 days a head start. So they start going away from Darius. Then the army, the Scythian army and their allies, they divided it into 3 groups. And then they tricked Darius with one of the groups. The others kind of like disappeared for a moment. So Darius sees this group and he started pursuing it. He pursues them and these guys are walking away. They are not facing him. So he follows them until he reaches a place where there was a desert. And he thinks these guys have gone into the desert and he kind of like, maybe they are not going to survive in the desert. Meanwhile, these guys took a turn and came back into the land. And then Darius starts coming back. Here's another thing that happened as these people were walking away from Darius. They were destroying the pasture, they were destroying the water sources, they were cutting down trees, they were just destroying anything that they knew the army of Darius would rely on to survive. So that's what they did. So when they disappeared, when Darius is coming back, he sees the other 2 groups and he starts pursuing them again. So he pursues them. And what became very difficult for Darius to fight these Scythians and their allies is that Darius and in general the Persians were so used to going to conquer people who are settled, people who have cities and towns and people who do farming. So people who are like tied down to a particular spot, they can't move. That's the kind of people they were used to fighting. But now the Scythians were a nomadic tribe. In fact, all the others, except the Budini, Herodotus tells us that the Budini were like a kind of settled kind of tribe. But the others were nomads. It was their way of life to move from one place to another. And that made it very difficult for Darius to fight them because there was no city of theirs he would go and burn down or lay siege to or do anything. These people moved with everything they owned. That was their way of life. Now, at some point after following these armies around, Darius is becoming frustrated. And he sends a message to the king of the Scythians. His name was Itantisus. And this is the message he sends him. He tells him, "You are a strange man. Why do you keep on flying before me? When there are 2 things you might do so easily. One, if you deem yourself able to resist my arms, cease the wandering and come and let's engage in a battle. Or if you recognize that my strength is greater than yours, bring your lord." Now, Darius calls himself your lord, like, now I'm your lord. "Bring your lord, earth and water, and come at once to a conference." Like he's telling them. During that time, there was something they used to call earth and water, which was like, think bringing soil and water from your land to an army you think you can't fight, as a symbol of surrendering. So it was basically telling them, surrender, because you either fight me or you surrender. You can't keep running away from me like this. And the Scythian king replied. He told him, This is our way of life. In fact, our moving around is not because of you. This is how we live. We are nomads. Yeah? Uh, of course, they were moving around. They knew what they were doing. They were playing a psychological game, but um, he's pretending like that's not what it was. He tells them, "We never fear men or fly from them. We've not done so in the past, and we are not going to do it now. We are not going to fly away from you. There is nothing new or strange in what we do. We only follow our common mode of life in peaceful times. In fact, for us, it's peaceful time. We are not in a war with anyone, not you, not anyone else. So we just leading our lives like we do every day when there is no war. And he tells him, we shall not join battle with you unless it pleases us. He goes further, telling him, as for the lords, you called yourself our Lord. I acknowledge only Jove, my ancestor, and Vesta, and the Scythian queen. I don't acknowledge anyone else to be my Lord. And I will not send you earth and water. We are not surrendering, but you shall soon receive more suitable gifts. Last of all, in return for your calling yourself my Lord, I say to you, go weep. So that's the message Darius receives, and he keeps still following them, but now he doesn't understand what's going on. At some point, the Persian army is running low on supplies. And the Scythians notice this. They notice these people have started to panic. Their supplies are running low. And do you know what they do? They go and they take some livestock close to them and leave them for them so that they have food to eat. And the Persians are even more confused. These people are our enemies, but they are kind of giving us food when they notice that we are running out of food. So that makes Darius even more paranoid, perplexed. He doesn't know what's going on. And then the Scythian king finally sends him some gifts. The gifts were a bird, a mouse, a frog, and 5 arrows. So when the messenger brings these gifts to Darius asks him, what do these gifts signify? What is the meaning? And he tells them, I was just told to bring you and leave. I wasn't told to come and explain to you what they mean. And if you people are wise, you should find out the meaning by yourselves. You don't need to be taught. So the Persians start talking to one another and trying to find out what it means. Finally, Gobryas, who was one of the 7 who led an insurrection and put Darius to power, tells the king what he thinks they mean. He tells the king, I think these mean like, if you can turn into birds and fly up into the sky, or become mice and burrow under the ground, or make yourself frogs and take refuge in the water, you will never escape from this land but die pierced by our arrows. So Gobryas thinks that's what it means. And the king kinda is persuaded that that's likely the meaning of these gifts. So after the gifts had been sent, the Scythians finally show up and they put themselves in a formation to fight a battle with the Persians. And Darius is like, finally, these people have come. Now we're going to show them something we Persians know how to do very well, and that's fight in the battlefield. So they are aligned to the other side. The Persians are organizing themselves on this other side. And then something weird happens. And hare, an animal, start running in the middle. And the Syrians start chasing the hare. They start hunting. And Darius asks some of these people, what are these people doing? They saw that they started hunting, they are running after an hare. And that now made Darius to be even more paranoid. Like, these people behave like we don't exist, like we are not visible to them. They come here, they want to fight, and then they see an hare and they start chasing it instead of fighting us. That made him very much paranoid. And in fact, that night, Darius, talking to some of his advisors, they decide these people know something we don't, and we have to escape before we die. And they, in the night, they put things together. They leave behind a small army so that they continue tricking the Scythians that they are still around. And the rest of the troops leave, and there's a small army that is tricked to remain behind with some small amount of animals. The army leaves at night. Tomorrow morning, the Scythians wake up and they look over. There is no army. There is a very small group of men and animals, and they go there, and the men just surrender and tell them Darius escaped and he tricked us here. So the Scythians chase after the Persians. But it happens that the Persians followed a particular path that they had used, when they came. The Scythians did not realize that the Persians would follow that path, because that path was destroyed. There was no food, there was no pasture, there was no water. So they thought the Persians would follow a different path that they knew would have pasture. So they followed that. But they reached the bridge before the Persians. And they reach the bridge and they find that the Persians have not arrived. They find the Greeks taking care of the bridge, and they tell the Greeks, you know what? You people are slaves of the Persians, and we are giving you an opportunity to be free. Just dismantle the bridge and go back home. The Greek talk among themselves. They don't know what to do. If we dismantle the bridge and then the Darius comes and then somehow he crosses, he's going to punish us. If we don't dismantle the bridge, the Scythians are going to be our enemy and they might attack us. So they are in this situation. They don't know what to do. If they do this, they are in trouble. They are likely to be in trouble. If they do this, they are likely. So they decide the middle. They dismantle the bridge as the Scythians are watching to a certain point, and the Scythians leave thinking these people have dismantled the bridge, and they leave it halfway. At night, the Scythians go back hoping to meet the Persians on the way. They miss them again. The Persians come to the bridge. The bridge is dismantled halfway. At first, Darius is worried that the Greeks have left, and he calls one of his generals, who was an Egyptian, who had a very loud voice, and he tells him to call out for the Greeks in case they are on the other side. And he calls out, and the Greeks hear them, and they bring ships, and they help them to escape. And that's how Darius left Europe, humiliated and not knowing what was happening. And because of the Greeks helping Darius cross over, when the Scythians found out, from that point they had these they had low opinion of the Greeks. Because of that, they used to say that if a Greek be looked upon as a free man, they are cruel. But if they be considered as under servitude, they are the most faithful of slaves. Yeah, so that's how Darius escaped from Europe without fighting the Scythians he wanted to punish.